I actually have a degree in mechanical engineering, and I went to work as an engineer and found out I wasn't a really good engineer, and I really liked working with people. So I got a job teaching math down in the inner city of LA, and to get the job, I told them I'd help with football out. And I coached down there for about 4 years. They had real good teams. The school I was at, Bill High School, but I just didn't like the program. Somehow I just couldn't get in the whole deal of coaching at that time. And now looking back, I realize why, because it was the morality level of the coaches wasn't too hot. And there was an awful lot of drugs on the team, and they didn't do anything about that. And the coaches would literally bring their beer onto campus as they would break down films. And, somehow it just didn't fit with me too much. But so I got away from coaching, and then when my youngest son started to play football, I got back into coaching, and like most of you, got addicted to it and couldn't get away from it. And couldn't read enough books and everything else. This year, or next year, this coming year, he's going to be a freshman, and he sort of let me know that he wants to go try it on his own, and I can watch from the sidelines. Which is fine with me because I want to give him a chance to, be without. He's a pretty independent kid anyway. But just realize I'm not going to coach next year. I'm already starting to feel the effects of it and the sadness of it. And I'm going to miss it. And I'm probably going through some of the same stuff that a lot of you are going to go through when you guys decide to retire from coaching. In this slide it says, I know it's hard, man, but the worst is over. The vomiting and the fear shakes are nearly gone, and your husband's body will no longer play football. Actually, now I'm not running around with kids, and my wife has decided to haul me off to the gym. Next slide, please. This slide it says he wants to see about trading his cake for a six-pack. How many of you play golf here? Well, I've been thinking a little bit about taking up golf, and I went out to a place called Cypress Cove. Anybody ever heard of Cypress Cove? Well, I could have sworn I saw some of the coaches out there playing a little golf out there.
Thanks, Ty.
That's wrong. That's wrong.
Oh. If anybody wants to, is going to give a presentation back at the symposium,
Stop the video.
This
Stop the video.
You take this guy's picture off, and the guy behind looks exactly like John Ward. You don't even have to. And I know they're big golfers back there. Well, anyway, I had some losing seasons, and some of you probably had some losing seasons, and especially in the middle of the year when it's, you got the rest of the year to look at, sometimes you feel like you're on this road, and there's times like that you want to get out of coaching, but, what really draws us to coaching is, just the enthusiasm and the expression on kids' faces. I picked this up out of the newspaper, and I just loved it. This kid on the left, he's so proud about being on the front, and I don't know what the kid in the middle is doing, but the kid on the right, it's just killing him that he's a step behind. And I think that's what ultimately really draws us to coaching. This is a picture of my grandson, his first year at T-ball. He's running from second to third base, and you can just see the total joy on his face. Next. This is actually my son. His first year of tackle football, he was 48 pounds, and the minimum was 50. So we had to fatten him up for him to make weight. And why I love this picture is because it humbles me. The reason it humbles me is because back then, you get so, as a youth coach, you get so in, you just lose yourself sometimes into the moment. And I just thought that, he was going to do absolutely wonderful things. And sometimes you get a little disappointed when they don't turn out quite as good as you think they are. And so now I look back and I look at him and I said, my gosh, how do you even hold that helmet up on his head, let alone play football? He actually did fairly well, being the smallest kid on the team. But anyway, as I got back into youth coaching and as a psychologist, I couldn't help but start trying to pay attention to what was going on psychologically. My wife actually helped me out because anytime I got out of control, she sort of let me know that I'd gone over the edge and I was scaring the kids, or I was bullying them around too much. And I kept telling her, yeah, but this is football. We got to be tough. And so it took me a little while to learn the difference between being tough and sometimes being overbearing. And that's a lot what my book was about, because it wasn't really hard for me as much as I began to just. What happened in 7 years was that I was able to track a lot of the same kids with the same parents, the same coaches, and really see what kids began to blossom under certain circumstances, and which kids that were great athletes to begin with started going downhill a little bit every year until the time they got to high school. Didn't want to play anymore. And we know that the dropout rate from youth sports is somewhere up like about 70%. Anyway, out of that 7 years came this book, Achieving Competitive Excellence, and it's actually turned out a lot better than I thought it would. I wanted to thank two editors, but the first editor is my wife, who kept on me to learn what I need to learn. And Ted Say, I'm sorry he left, because Ted is an incredibly bright, brilliant person. I had 3 professional editors go through this book, and then I asked him to just edit it, and I'll tell you, he found so many mistakes. So here's my specific goals that I want to accomplish today. It's a little bit taken out from this book. First, I want to develop an understanding of the psychology of choking, and second, instruct you in counseling athletes to minimize choking and to maximize their potential. To do this, we're going to have to concentrate on 2 feelings in particular, the feeling of fear and the feeling of shame. Now let's look at some examples real quick. Here's Tiger Woods winning the Masters tournament about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And actually, I don't know how many of you watched part of that tournament. It was the first tournament that I watched. I just picked it up about the 10th hole in the final day, and I got so interested in it, I asked my wife to sit down and watch it. She's a very, very perceptive person. She sat down and started watching it about the 15th hole, and the first thing that came out of her mouth was, "Look at the fear on Tiger's face." That very same moment, the announcer said that he could tell that Tiger had lost of his aggressiveness. He used it as an example how Tiger was beginning, instead of following through with his putt, he started pulling back just a slight bit. And if you follow that tournament, from about the 15th hole on, he came very close to losing it. He lost all his momentum. Actually, you go to this picture, you can see the fear in his face. And almost the shame, it's like it's overwhelming him. Now he he didn't normally have this degree of fear playing the whole tournament. And he might have been in a very difficult shot there. But when I was collecting information for this book, about 1.5 years ago, when he was struggling really hard, somebody had asked him what was wrong with this game. And he made the comment, "I don't know, something is holding me back." So he could tell that he had lost part of his aggressiveness or lost part of his confidence, but he couldn't identify what was going on inside of him. Let me show you another example. This is an example of a high jumper. That's not really a high jumper, but I couldn't, female high jumper. I couldn't find a female high jumper. Out of an article titled "Doing Imagery in the Field," Jeff Simmons, a psychologist, describes his experience of helping a high jumper who had reached her plateau and was unable to progress. The coach shared with Jeff that the athlete was having trouble with her takeoffs. As Jeff began to investigate, he discovered that the jumper had no image or memory of any kind from the moment her final foot plant hit the ground until she landed in the high jump pit. In other words, when she landed, put her foot down, she was completely unconscious of what happened until she hit the pit. She had all that blocked out. The reason that was blocked out was because of fear and shame that had built up inside of her. So the way he was able to help her was to help her become aware of that moment. And so then the coach could then help her with her techniques. But because she had blocked that out, just like with Tiger Woods blocking out whatever he was blocking out to a certain degree, the coach wasn't able to help. In contrast, there's actually a picture of my son playing basketball when he was younger on the left. He's got, I think he's, I didn't notice this before, but I guess he's got his tongue out like Michael Jordan. My wife and I worked really hard in helping my son always be aware of himself and stay present with himself. And he's not played a lot of basketball. He plays like about 2.5 months out of the year, and he doesn't hardly play any other time. This last year, going to a private school, small private school, he had to be one of the better players, so the coach wanted him to shoot a lot more, and he really hasn't shot a lot. So he went out in our backyard. We got a pretty good sized basketball court in the backyard, and he started shooting, and he got pretty darn consistent for the three-point line. You know, they got to shoot behind the three-point line. They can't shoot it in front. And he'd sometimes hit 5 or 6 right in a row for the three-point line. He might miss 12 in a row, but even the ones he missed were pretty darn close. But when he got in the game, when he went to shoot the ball, he wasn't even close to it. And part of the reason was that he has a coach she's very good technique-wise, but she's one of these coaches that just coaches constantly through the whole game. She never stops coaching. She's constantly telling the kids what to do. So the kids are out there trying to pay attention to her as they're paying attention to the game. Anyway, I asked my son afterwards, I said, why do you think you were having some trouble? And he says, Dad, I know why. He said, when I went to shoot the ball, I could feel my hand pull back just a little bit. He was pulling back just to protect himself. He was pulling back because of the pressure that the coach was putting on him. And he could recognize it. Where the other two were woods, and this high jumper didn't recognize that moment, he was aware of it. It was just slight. A coach couldn't pick it up. I doubt even a camera could pick it up. But it was enough to throw his shot off. Well, it's moments like this that really got me to thinking about, you know, what really is choking all about, and how do we help kids perform at their best, especially as competitive as sports has become. You know, I graduated high school in 1960, and I'm just and looking at those old-time films that Ted had, you know, you got youth football teams doing more than those pro teams were back there in the 40s, you know. And kids start so much earlier, so I think it's so much more important to really understand when we're overwhelming kids and when kids aren't able to really be aware of what's going on. Anyway, what I want to do first is develop a quick psychology of excellence, so we know from the basis of why we can excel to the point we do. One of the major differences between animals and humans is that animals fit perfectly into their environment. Next slide, please. Here's a perfect example. Here's a polar bear laying on a pile of snow, and he's just having a great old time. If you think about it, we, as humans, start off in a one-down position. We don't fit into any environment whatsoever. Now, there's some environments that are much easier to fit into, tropical islands. We still have to learn how to fish, preserve our food, and build shelters. We, as humans, start off in a one-down position. Yet, we, for some reason, can excel to the highest. The desert's got to be one of the hardest places to live. But look what's happened when we've done in the desert.
I don't do so good there.
There's no more pure pleasure spot in the world than down in Vegas. So how is it that we can start in a one-down position but be able to excel? And it's all around the concept of human consciousness and how the human mind can actually split off and dissociate. I did an awful lot of work with multiple personalities. I'm going to use an example in a minute, schizophrenia. But because of our ability to split off, we have the ability to super focus on particular goals. Next slide. I remember when I was a senior in high school, I played at Covina High School, and our crosstown rival was West Covina High. And they were a newer school, they were much bigger than us. They were much better. They were favored to win the league, and we were favored to be down towards the bottom. And I remember the rally that we had on a Friday at lunch in the school gym to prepare for the game. And back in those days, you know, the whole student body's there, the teachers and cheerleaders and everything like that. And at the end of the, we were called the Colts. And at the end of the rally, the coach had taken a horseshoe, painted red, and hung it from the basketball loop. And one by one, the whole team went down and touched that loop. I'll tell you, just about brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it today. When I touched the horseshoe. When I touched that horseshoe, I went into a zone. I went into a pure hypnotic trance. And I stayed there all afternoon and right up into the game. And I think the rest of the team did too, because we ended up beating them. And that's a perfect example of an athletic team, a bunch of individuals splitting off dissociate, and I don't remember anything that happened that whole rest of the afternoon. I was just in this sort of fixated trance that is just as real to me as it was in 1960. When I write a book, I don't get into that total trance state, but I get into it takes a couple years to write a book. I will get into a split off state and stay in that somewhat split off state for a couple of years. In the middle of the night, I'll be thinking about things, and we all do this. I know you guys do this as football players when you're trying to get ready for in the middle of the night, you wake up and figure out that, and the whole football season, you're probably in sort of a semi-trance state. Your wife's probably saying, Bert, wake up, what are you doing? Did you hear what I just said, Bert? We get into this trance, so it's our ability to split off and super concentrate in a particular area that really gives us the ability to excel. I mean, some people that have solved some of the greatest mathematical mysteries and science mysteries spend their whole life in sort of a state off in a room practically by themselves. All right. Now, let me just give you an example of multiple personalities, because it's in multiple personalities that we really see how much the mind can really split off. The one example I want to give, I forgot her name, but it was actually a Miss America that was severely sexually abused by her father as a child. And so at night when her father would come into her room, she would split off into this altered consciousness or this other personality, and that would be the personality that would be out while her father abused her. In some ways it's not a heck of a lot different than you guys having your football personality out during the season. You know, there's a part of you that's a different person. You're not totally split off, but it's the same mechanism that's happening in the mind. Now, during the day, her father would treat her out of his own guilt and shame. He would treat her like the best daughter in the world, and she was in her regular personality, and everybody thought they had this most loving relationship. Because during the day, the relationship looked perfect, and she had the abuse events completely blocked out. And then at night, when he'd come down to her room, she'd switch. Well, once she got out of the house and started to grow up, she started to have these memories of what happened. So, you can just see that when the mind begins to dissociate, it takes on an autonomy of its own. And here's an example of 3 kids. I mean, how many times have you gone down to the beach with your kids and it's freezing cold, and the kids get out there and they're totally oblivious to the cold water, and they get out there and they play in it until their whole bodies turn blue. And they don't feel any pain because they're so focused on what they're doing. So again, it's the ability to dissociate and super focus that allows us to have these peak moments, to have great performances in sports, to solve the greatest problems, to build a city out in the desert, and so forth. I have 2 grandchildren, so I've gone to some very young birthday parties here recently, and they always have the piñata out there at the end of break. And it's interesting because I'm always looking around and surfing, and there's usually a couple shy kids at the party that don't know how to fit in, not very assertive. And then you get the piñata out there, and everybody starts getting pretty fired up. And when they put that little stick in their hands, almost every single kid starts to get really into this zone state. And even if there's 1 or 2 kids left that's pretty timid about swinging that bat, as soon as the piñata breaks, it's everybody. Everybody's in there 100%, like a fumble in a Super Bowl game. So when you can take the shyest kid and put him in the right circumstances, and he's going to be just as aggressive as anybody else. All right. So, let me, Rick, since your head coach wanted me to have you volunteer, I want you to come up here as a volunteer. What I want you to do is to face the audience, and I want you to lead everybody in the national anthem.
Sure.
Okay? I'm free.
No.
All right, you guys go follow along with them. I'm free. 1, 2. All right, that's okay. Go ahead. I didn't want to trouble everybody. All right.
$100.
Not worth it. Right, now.
That's worth Jose.
Now, I would have hated that myself. Now, what happened to you? And any of the rest of you that would have, I just praying I wouldn't pick somebody that's a ham and loves to sing. Richard, that's why I didn't pick you. We'd be singing right along. What started happening to you up there? What happened to your body?
Red as a turtle.
Anybody else, if you pictured yourself up there not wanting to do it, what starts happening to your body when you get up in an embarrassing point like that?
You start sweaty, feeling sweaty.
Anxiety.
All right, anxiety. Heart rate goes up.
Memory goes down.
All right, yeah, right. Well, that's true. You put a little kid in front of a class that's been writing something to say for a whole week, he gets up there and his mind goes blank, doesn't it?
How about how bad I wanted to think about punching you in the face?
Well, I'm glad you say that because I'm going to come back to that point because that's actually a very important point. But what happens, your body starts closing down, it starts sucking in. It doesn't want to produce. It just starts sucking down. Not anything different than Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, and in the game of golf, all you got to do is close down about that much, and you're off your game, and you're not going to win. You don't have to close down very much. In fact, it's because the game is so technical, and all you got to do is close down just a little bit, that somebody like Tiger Woods doesn't know what's happening inside of him, or that high jumper. But what happens is that our body either closes down and shuts off and take a defensive move, or it can get more aggressive. It can get on the point of becoming more aggressive. Now what happens with kids is that, especially in the youth level, is because they look up to you so much as an authority figure that one of the things that one of the responsibilities that they subconsciously give over to you is for you to protect them and to feel safe with you. Now, it doesn't mean you can't beat them up a little bit and come away with some bruises and things like that, but as far as their self-esteem or their ego, they want you to protect them. They need you to protect them. So if you're to do something like that with a kid, where he doesn't have his own power, he's going to shut down. Now we as adults, mature, and been in tough situations like that, we're going to fight. Most likely we're going to fight. All right. But what happens is that just like that person who's a multiple personality, is that there's a subconscious part of our mind that starts to take over. And it has a power of its own. It will do whatever is necessary to protect the person. That make a difference the game's on the line, make a difference it's the Super Bowl, the Masters tournament, or whatever. If a part of you starts to feel threatened, that part is going to start to protect itself one way or another. And then it takes the person out of their game, and they begin to choke. All right. Go on to 2 slides. Here's a diagram that kind of illustrates the ex-mechanical engineer. If you look at my book back there, you'll see diagrams in there. I always got to put something in a diagram. But in this diagram here on the right, if there's little moments of shame or fear, then there's a certain amount of energy that's going to go towards taking care of that shame and fear in a person. And there's nothing you can do about it. It takes over. It has a life of its own. Yet, if there isn't any fame or shame, then the person can take all his energy and direct it outward. So you realize that you're splitting and zoning off either way. You're either splitting and zoning off towards your goal, or you're splitting and beginning to zone off inward to protect the person. All right, now let's, next slide. According to Dr. Harold Quanis, professor of neurology at Rush Medical College in Chicago, I see people taking notes, and now we pass out, man. He's the author of the book, Why Michael Can't Hit, Why Michael Jordan Can't Hit. Very fascinating book, worth reading. And he states that highly trained athletic movement is a product of a multisynaptic reflexes of the brain. So what does this mean, and how does this help us understand choking? In a simple reflex, like hitting the knee and then your leg jumps up, in a simple reflex, what happens is that if somebody taps your knee, it triggers a sensory neuron. It goes just right up to the spinal cord and triggers a motor neuron that comes right back down and causes the muscle to contract. So in a simple reflex, it's hit the knee right at the spinal cord and right back down. It's a very, very quick, simple movement. And a complex reflex, which is really what learned athletic activity is about. For instance, a baseball player who sees the ball, fires a sensory neuron, it goes up the spine into the brain. The brain then begins to, in a split second, calculate whether the person should swing the bat and how the person should swing the bat. Once the brain decides, then it triggers a motor neuron, and then the actual swinging of the bat is a reflex action. You don't make decisions in the middle of swinging your bat. I mean, I don't know much about baseball, but I know when you start to swing, you can start to make some changes. But basically, what you want is a pure reflex movement. When linemen fire off that line, you want a pure reflex movement. When that quarterback sees something and begins to throw that ball, when he makes a decision to throw that ball, you want practically a pure reflex movement. All right, is that clear enough? Did you understand enough? So, now what happened in one part of his foot, next slide please, he makes reference to neurologist William Patton, who studied long loop reflexes, which means they go up in the brain and then back down. And one of his subjects was Wayne Gretzky. He said that Gretzky had the fastest long loop reflexes of anybody he studied. And Gretzky was great, mainly because he could get his shot off quicker than anybody else. And he still had great aim and great skill, but what made him above everybody else was the quickness he got his shot off. Well, how could he get that shot off so quick? Probably two reasons. Probably innate athletic ability, but it was also the way he trained. From his book, this is how he states when he trained when he was a kid. I get up in the morning, skate from 7 to 8:30, go to school, come home at 3:30, stay on the ice until my mom insisted I come in for dinner, eat in my skates, then go back out at 9 o'clock until 9 o'clock at night. On Saturdays and Sundays, we'd have huge games. But when nighttime became my time, it was sort of an unwritten rule around the neighborhood that I was to be out there by myself with my dad. I would just handle the puck in and out of those empty detergent bottles. I was so addicted that my dad had big kids come over and play against me, and when the kids wanted to go home, I'd beg them to stay longer. So he practiced that complex reflex movement over and over and over and over and over again. That's why the author says that Michael Jordan can't hit it, because he didn't practice that when he was young, when his mind was developing.
How young is that? At what age does that cease?
When did he start like that?
No, what age does that stop?
But what the neurologist says, and I forgot his Hawkins, he says that one of the differences between the human brain and mammals is that mammals, their brain is near perfectly developed at birth. Ours does not develop until near the age of 12 or 13. So all that development is going on during that time. So somebody like Gretzky, who's practicing those moments, is imprinting those moments into his brain. One neurologist, as an experiment, took people who had started playing the piano before the age of 12, and another group of people that didn't start playing the piano until after the age of 12. And when they were adults, he measured them with a brain scan as they played the piano. And those that started before the age of 12 used a much greater part of their mind as they were playing the piano versus those that started playing the piano after 12. Which really says a lot that when your kids are young, they should be in multiple physical activities, not just focusing on one activity. Because if you have them do nothing but focus on baseball, and then all of a sudden they get tired of baseball and want to go play something else, then their minds haven't developed in that area. Yeah.
The other interesting aspect that you touched on was you said that he said it was my desire, it was my love for the game. It was me begging those kids to stay and play.
Right.
It wasn't his dad saying, we're going to stay
Right.
out here and do it. And I think that makes a big difference.
Well, it makes a huge difference. And all his dad all his dad did was sit up those milk cans or whatever he used to play in. Right. And I bring that out an awful lot in my book in terms of nurturing the pure passion of a child. All right, let's go to the next diagram, because now we can really understand what choking is about. Let's go back to our baseball player. Sees the ball, fires the sensory neuron, goes up in the brain. Now, what the baseball player needs to do is to focus on that ball in a split second, be able to calculate whether or not he should swing at it and how he should swing at it. Now, if that baseball player also has a little bit of guilt or shame inside of his mind, then he's going to have to bring that into the calculation. Just like when you were up here in front, Rick, it's not that you could just sit here and say, okay, I'll sing. There was another part of your mind that was starting to work. You know, most of us would probably be scared to death about standing up there and singing. But you get in the shower by yourself and you're singing away. Because there's no shame or fear involved. Well, check on with your wife. That's what she says. But we have those moments that we would be embarrassed in front of people. We get off by ourselves. We don't have any problem. So if there's a little bit of fear or shame that person must calculate and put into the diagram, then he's not going to have a pure reflex swing. That swing is going to be based on what he sees in the ball, but also based on what he has to do to protect himself emotionally. Just like my son drawing his hand back. Now, why did my son draw his hand back? Because when we are put up here to do something that we don't feel comfortable about, or if we feel that we might be beat up about, then there's a part of us that doesn't want to do it. There's a part of us that just wants to run out of the room. But if we can't physically run out of the room, our mind's going to help us out and kind of run out of the room on its own. So my son didn't want to shoot that shot, because if he really tried to shoot it and he missed, then he would really have to take the full brunt of the coach. But if he pulls back a little bit, then he didn't really try. We know kids do this all the time in school. I don't want to go to school. You know, teachers, you're not teaching anything, and why should I learn? Well, they're just scared. They're scared of trying most of the time. All right, so anytime there's a little bit of residue of fear and shame running around inside your head, you're not going to have that pure moment. It's going to have a new calculation to it. All right? So Tiger, after 2.5 years of not winning a major tournament, and everybody on his back, you ain't going to win one, and is it because you're married and all this other stuff? You know, he's got some hesitation in there, just a little bit, but it's enough to throw him off. All right, now, I forgot how we started and where we're at on time, but I think we're doing pretty good with this. What we need to do is to understand the difference between good fear and bad fear, and good shame and bad shame. And I'll try and go through this. I think a lot of this one, now you guys are intelligent people, and I just go through this. You know, I can tell that it's maybe you haven't heard it presented like this, but you certainly have done a lot of thinking along these lines. So what's the difference between good fear and bad fear? Yeah, next slide. About a year ago, I went over to the Orange County Airport to catch a plane. And I was standing around, and there was this black athlete about 6'4", standing off the side. He just sat down. He looked like he was about 55, and he's an incredible build. Just perfect build. And I looked at him and said, my gosh, he's got to be a professional football player with his size. And why don't I recognize him? I can kind of recognize him, but I just couldn't quite place him. So I'm pretty comfortable about going up to professional football players. So I went up and sat beside him, and I said, do you play professional football? He says, no, but my son does, or did. He was playing for the 49ers. And I said, well, what's his name? Ken Norton Jr.
Oh, not
sitting right next to Ken Norton, ex-heavyweight champion of the world, guy that broke Muhammad Ali's jaw. And so I apologized, and he laughed. And then I thought, well, this is my perfect opportunity to understand some of the emotions that go on in a boxer. And he said that boxers fight best when they fear being hurt by the other guy. They fight best when they fear being hurt by the other guy. So that's got to be kind of a good kind of fear, right? When Robert Parrish, the All-Pro center for Boston Celtics, was asked what made Larry Bird so great, Robert quickly answered, Bert feared losing. He feared losing. Kobe, a while ago, was asked what he feared most, and he said losing. Now, this is before he got in trouble with the courts and Shad. But, so there is a good fear that's a part of athletics. So what's the difference between a good fear and a bad fear? Next slide, please. A good fear is a fear that we feel capable of and confident enough to endure, overcome, and grow. Bad fear is a fear that overwhelms us, resulting in feelings of out of control of the situation. In other words, we as human beings love a fear that allows us to then motivate us to overcome something. Because if we have some confidence that we're going to be able to conquer it, overcome it, then it really makes us feel much better. Now, if you had put me in the ring with Ken Norton, I would have ran. Because I wasn't confident enough, obviously, to even try in there. You put a kid in there with Ken Norton, he'd probably just freeze and not move. But a good fear makes us actually feel alive. And the kind of fear that we often feel before a game is sort of it just wakes us up and just makes us feel. You know, all these extreme sports, these guys that just do these mostly crazy things with skiing and skateboarding and everything like that. They feel enough in control that they can manage that fear. But once you start to overwhelm somebody with a fear that they don't feel safe enough, they don't feel they have the ability to properly handle something, then they got to retreat. And then it becomes a devastating bad fear. So part of being a good coach is how to learn about what's appropriate fear and what's an inappropriate fear. Let's go back to some pictures of some athletes. Now, here again is a picture of Tiger Woods, and you can tell that fear in him has got him overwhelmed. Now, who's that on the right? Montana. Now, that's a picture of him sitting up against the wall all by himself, getting ready for a game. Now, if you look at him closely, you can see a little bit of fear in his eyes. But it's an appropriate kind of fear. It's just a small amount of fear that's making his mind work and going over and over again what he should do and what he should do in these situations and what kind of defense they're running and everything else like that. So it's a small fear. He doesn't feel overwhelmed by it. He still feels confident, but it allows him to play a better game. Now, anybody recognize the eyes of this guy here? Singletary.
Not afraid of anything.
Well, but there's some fear in his eyes.
Yeah, he won't get there.
There's a little fear in his eyes. And I asked two people that don't even know who Singletary is, do you see some fear in his eyes? There's a little bit of fear. Now, somebody probably made, what do you think his fear is about?
He won't get there in time to take that guy's head off.
Right, exactly. That his expectations are up here, and if he doesn't match them, the guy gets 6 inches on him or whatever, you know. But it's an appropriate kind of fear. But there is a little bit of fear involved in his eyes. So fear is not a bad thing. It can burn an intensity in somebody. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now, what about a coach that screams all the time? Tries to scare kids into hitting hard and stuff like that. Now, is that a good fear or is that a bad fear? Why is it a bad fear? Here's part of it, and this is and I don't sense this hardly all with you guys, but this is with a lot of new youth coaches. You know, what happens is that, especially a little kid, if the father's standing there yelling at him because he won't hit this bigger kid, because the bigger kid's been playing football for 3 years, and this little kid's half his size, and he's afraid about hitting this kid, if the big father comes over and starts screaming at him, or the big coach comes over and starts screaming at him, the fear of disappointing that person might overwhelm and be bigger than the fear of hitting that guy, so he might hit that guy. So it becomes kind of a seductive thing to the coach, that he sees immediate results from bullying that kid into doing something. But they're not long-lasting results, because as the fears overwhelm that kid, then he's going to lose his desire and his courage really to play. So, you understand that? Does that make sense? And I know it does. And I wouldn't be talking about this if I wasn't guilty of this stuff, and if my wife wasn't right behind me telling me when I was overwhelming some kid with my anger. Now what about Bobby Knight? He's a yeller. Now what about him? He's got a pretty good record. Doing pretty good again. And what about him? Here he is criticized a lot for his yelling and his temper tantrums, yet, you know, done pretty good.
Yeah, but could he accomplish more by taking a different strategy?
He might. I also think it's a situation, again, which you brought up, Rick. The players are older, they're in college, and they have much more stronger ego than especially youth football players. And I haven't been around high school players to tell the difference. I had a friend of mine who played for Woody Hayes. Now there's a yeller. And he said that Woody Hayes would make those guys so mad at him that they go take it out on the other team. And that they wanted to kill it, Woody Hayes. They hated his guts and they wanted to kill him. And they took it out on the other team. But those are older guys. They're in college. And I also think that for an older coach, like a Bobby Knight or a Woody Hayes, those guys got a warm side to them. You know, they care for the kids too. And they want those kids to win and do good. So I think some of those characteristics come out also. But with a smaller kid, and I would think that you find that situation a lot with freshman football players. Maybe not so much with seniors, but you certainly find them with freshmen and sophomores. Maybe you find them with seniors too. I mean, there's a lot of fragile pro football players out there today. And they'll start not to do good. All right. Let's see. I get ahead of myself. Let's go to the next slide. Actually, I need another volunteer. Richard, can you come up here, please?
Thanks, Ty.
Come on up here.
Yeah,
You know how it is in football. I need a volunteer. You, and you. You guys all do that out in the field, so I get to do it. All right, here's what I want you to do. Come over here. Stand over here. You can catch this okay, can't you? All right, good. Are you right-handed or left-handed?
Left-handed.
All right, get over here. What I want you to do is to face everybody. I want you to throw this, look forward.
All right.
I want you to put your hand back here. I want you to just throw it over your shoulder and catch it. Richard, this is very easy to catch. Now just throw it back and catch it, Richard.
You can turn around.
Richard,
Got it.
catch the ball, Richard. All right, okay. All right. Now what was I trying to do? Go ahead, sit down.
Yell at him.
Yell at him. I didn't get, he didn't miss it enough times for me to really get wound up and start shaming. Now,
I was getting scared, Ty. I was getting scared.
I tried this on my son. He kept missing it. And I said, "This is great." You know. You did pretty good. 3 times. That's good because you don't even know where that ball is going, especially standing in front of it.
You scared me, Ty.
Were you aware of what was happening inside of you?
Yeah, there was pressure to do it. I had to do it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So so you were trying really hard to do it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's because again, why? Because we're older and we're competitive. Now, did you start to feel any anger towards me?
Not yet.
One more time. All right. Well, what happens when we have a lot of fear or a lot of shame, we're embarrassed like that. We either suck it up, or we start turning towards an anger or a rage. And a lot of the a lot of football players, there's been a few football players that have had a huge rage in them. Sometimes it's helped them, and other times it's destroyed their lives. Who's the first one that comes to mind? Well, all the rage, boxer I'm thinking about that destroyed Mike Tyson, who's got an incredible amount of rage inside of him, and it did him some good for a while, but it's destroyed his life. Even somebody like a Pete Rose, who has a lot of anger and rage inside of him, these players that develop a lot of anger and rage and too much of it, they will excel, but they'll excel in one little area and they'll often fail in the whole rest of their life. I'm thinking of the linebacker.
L2.
Pardon?
L2.
Yeah, right. And you can all think of a few players that they were great because they were full of a rage, but they weren't too great outside of their life. All right. You know, why we have to be careful of fear and bad shame, or the difference between good fear and good shame and bad shame is pretty easy to understand. God gives us the awareness of some good guilt. He gives us the awareness of a little bit of guilt because it's there for a reason. So when we do something wrong, we need to feel a little bit guilty of it so that we can correct that situation. So it wakes up our mind that we need to make an adjustment in our life. If we do something purposely to hurt our family or our wife, we should feel a little bit of guilt so that, you know, that little bird in there tells us we need to go do something to patch this relationship up. So the good guilt is just a small kind of guilt that does nothing but just sort of wake our mind up. And it's all based on behavior, doing something purposely wrong. If a kid's screwing around, he's late to practice, he should feel a little bit of guilt. And he should be punished for the fact of his behavior. Bad guilt or bad shame doesn't come from God. It comes from human beings attacking the self-worth of other human beings. Gossip, racism. You attack the person for parts of him that you can't change. Big ears, freckles, pimples, all that stuff. Kids are vicious with each other, attacking a person for who they are. And that just completely paralyzes somebody because they can't change it. So sometimes we get out there and we get some pretty darn high expectations towards a kid, and he's trying his hardest, but he just can't do any better. And when we get on him for that, we're actually shaming who he is and shaming his effort, not shaming his bad behavior. Is that clear? And it's interesting because the kind of guilt that God gives us is not a deep punishing guilt. Not the kind of guilt or shame that tears up our insides and makes us feel terrible about ourselves. That's not the kind of guilt that comes from God. The kind of guilt that comes from God is just enough, a little bit of awareness to say, hey, Turkey, you're doing something wrong, you need to correct it. You know, you're out of place. Wake up. All right. I think that even more so today, you know, when I played football in high school, almost all my buddies worked during the summer. There was no summer sports whatsoever. You know, when school was out, you disappeared. You didn't see any of your teammates until maybe a handful they hung around with. September 1st, everybody got back together. My senior year, we had 2 new coaches from back east. We hadn't met them until the first day of practice. Didn't have a parents' meeting or anything. You showed up September 1st or the first day after Labor Day and met the coaches, and it was fine. You know, and it just wasn't the tough competitiveness, and there wasn't the kids hadn't grown up playing youth sports and sometimes being a hot shot and thinking they're great and always on other kids for not being good and teasing. There just wasn't that kind of atmosphere, not near as much. So I don't think there's anything that can destroy a kid and a teen quicker than bad shame or bad guilt. And I think it's something that coaches need to really be on top of. And to be on top of it, you need a set of rules and regulations that are all based on behavior. And you guys know that. That's nothing new. And it seems like that the more seasoned coach you are, the more you realize that the less rules and regulations, the better off you are. You have 1 or 2 main ones that you know, which is to never ever do something against the success of your team. You know, which really covers everything. Covers 1,001 rules. But first of all, to have a set of rules that are very simple to enforce, very plain, and it's not that a lot of this false shame can sneak into it. I think one of the other things that that is important to do, especially in the middle of a game, you know, it's very, very difficult to get involved in a game, and then when something goes wrong, to not show disappointment. Okay? It's almost impossible not to do. But sometimes when you have kids out there and it's in a championship game, it's in the 4th quarter, and each down becomes really critical, and a kid drops a pass or something like that, and you see it you know, on TV all the time, because they always show the camera on a coach, and it's very, very difficult for the coach not to go, like that. Well, when a kid's out there and he screws up, and he turns around and he sees the coaches and the teams and everybody else doing that, you know, it just magnifies the feelings of shame inside of him. Probably one of greatest coaching moments that I ever saw was about 4 years ago when Mater Dei was playing De La Salle in Anaheim. And De La Salle was up to about 155 consecutive wins. And I think Mater Dei had a really good team that year. They might have been rated #1 and #2 in the nation. I'm not sure. They were both up there really high. And it was, it was a big build-up. And De La Salle got off to a good start. We're ahead at halftime. And Mater Dei started kicking their butts in the second half. They started really coming back. But they had a long time to catch up. De La Salle wasn't giving anything easy. And right at the end of the game, Mater Dei was behind by 2 points. And they were coming, they were marching down the field. They had to start deep in their territory. And they were coming down the field. When they got down the end, they started running out of time. They had just enough time for a field goal. It was about a 30 or 35-yard field goal, well within the range of their good kicker, but not necessarily a guaranteed thing. Here it is, national recognition, get a chance to stop De La Salle's winning streak. And everything's set up, the guy misses the field goal. The guy misses the field goal, and he turns around and he takes about 3 steps. Rawlinson and ran onto the field. He was way down there, and as soon as that guy turned around, took step, Rawlinson hugged him. Instead of standing over there waiting for the guy to come off and all that pain that that guy would have to feel coming off, he ran out on the field and gave him a big hug. I think it was a beautiful, beautiful moment, something that Rawlinson must have thought through ahead of time. And can you just imagine what would have gone through that kid's mind when he turned around and had a look at the whole team and the whole audience. So I think it's moments like that that we can really become aware. I know sometimes it's really difficult. You're right in the game, but not to show some disappointment. But on the other hand, that might have made that kid's life. All right. One of the other things that I think I actually would like to write a book on, and a lot of you are probably much further ahead than me in thinking this thing through. I think the high, I think you copied about 90% of it from Lattice here, but Coach Canal, his priorities for his team are #1, cultivate a Christian living habitat, #2, character development, #3, educational excellence, and #4, comparative excellence. He said if he wasn't a Christian or he was a teacher in a non-Christian school, then he'd take out the first one and then just put the other 3. But as he talked about it, and there's other great coaches like John Wooden and I think Osborne of Nebraska who just stayed away from the whole winning thing a lot. And it just seems as you raise this up to a higher level, team unity, team pride, community pride, whatever, that the focus gets way up there, that it just takes away a lot of the bickering that goes on, a lot of the need to be a superstar, a lot of the need, me kind of mentality. And as he presented it, I could just see where it would just neutralizes all the junk that goes on with parents that want their kid to be a star. Well, that's not what we're about. We're about building champions for life. We're not about making stars out of individual football players. We're out about building the character of kids. So maybe he won't start. Maybe he's not going to be a star, but we're going to build on his character. And it's kind of a neat neutralizing effect with the parents and the kids themselves. So I think that's just a great way of eliminating a lot of the shame that can go on within a team. Now, how you can do that on a youth program, it's much harder because you got different kids, different parents, just coaches from year in, year out, year in and year out. But it's amazing. Some of the best coaches gotten away from the win philosophy. They team unity. We're here, and that's one of the most beautiful things about football, isn't it? You come together for a particular goal, and football is such that, sure, you have guys that are superstars, but they need the other guys on the team, don't they? They can't do it themselves. All right. I'm going to, I was going to pass these out ahead of time. Can I have 5 more minutes? Am I okay, time-wise? Pass these out real quick. See, there's a blank page on the front for lecture notes, but I'm going to suggest that you possibly try something. And I don't know if you can do this on a youth level, but you know what, it's probably really hard to do this on a youth level unless you have some really mature kids. But I'll tell you how you can kind of indirectly do this and how I sort of done it with my son. If I was to try this, and it might really backfire, but if I was a varsity coach, I might take 4 or 5 of my kids aside. If the head coach just wants to take, or one of the backfield coaches wants to just take skilled players, or the line coach wants to take 4 or 5 of his, and I would start this at the start of the season, and I'd set aside a time like a Monday at lunchtime, where you have half an hour, 45 minutes. I know it's like, okay, where do I cram in another half an hour? You know, it's interesting, as Coach Cano, and he's been very, very successful. He has about an 80% win record out there at Orange Lutheran. And every day before they go out to practice, they go to the classroom, and they spend 10 to 15 minutes on a character development exercise. They go, he develops a character in them before they even hit the field, every single day. And that's a big sacrifice of time over the whole season. You know, I would sit down with them after a game, and you tell them it's confidential, and I wouldn't go more than 5 or 6 kids. And I'd say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll fire it up for you before a game, and they can mark that down. And then I did this is a blank sheet that you can reproduce, and this one I already put some sort of fun things in that you might go through them at first so they can get them to laugh about it and relax a little bit. You know, number 2, list 3 pregame factors that either fired you up or distracted you. Put either a plus or a negative next to them. Fight with a girlfriend, a negative. Second one, teammate helped me get my mind back on the game, a positive. Felt anger towards my girlfriend and wanted to take it out on the other team, 2 positives. Number 3, identify one place in the game where you lost emotional momentum and were choked on a play. And this person writes in, right before I was to pass the ball, I saw my girlfriend with another guy. On a scale of 1 to 10, how low did you get? Well, off the scale, -2. And you can go through the rest of this on your own and have them fill it out. Tell them that it's theirs. They don't have to worry about English or spelling like that. And have them just discuss it a little bit with 4 or 5 players, and do that every week. And I think what will happen, not only will it draw you much closer to those kids are going to start becoming much more aware of their body. They're going to start becoming much more aware when they're choking, like my son does when he pulls his hand back. And it's going to be much easier to talk about bad moments. You know, when you have a bad moment and you just want to shut it down, you don't want to talk about it, then it multiplies. Then you're trapped. You can't even get to the kid. And part of what elevating the kid up to his highest potential is being able to talk to him, being able to understand what's going on, and why you had a bad moment out there. And I think it's even okay to say, you know, what could I as a coach done better? What did I need to change about it? And now what I would, you know, maybe it's just because of my son would never want to sit down and do this week after week, especially at the age of 14. But what I do is indirectly, I'd kind of ask him some of those questions. How did you do out there? What bad moments did you have? You know, when were you really good, when were you not? And I just throw some of those comments out to him, and in a non-threatening way as much as possible. And if there's no threat there, then he'll start thinking, he'll start internalizing, he'll start trying to figure out, well, you know, what happened to me when I wasn't as good as I should have been? And he'll start to take control of that part of his life that you disassociate and put out of your life when you feel too overwhelmed. All right. Well, unfortunately, coaching contains a certain reality to it, as depicted by this next cartoon. Here's a coach saying to his players, and remember, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing that keeps me from getting fired. Here's one more cartoon at the end. I changed this a little bit. The wife is really asking the husband, how many more games can you possibly sit through? He says 2 more. And I changed it a little bit. How many more games do you still need to break down? And he's saying 2 more. Well, anyway, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to butch back there, and I'll be more tickled to sell it to you. And if you have any questions afterwards, please come up and feel free to ask me. Thank you.